Machiavelli believed that a ruler who insists on being good will be destroyed by the sheer number of people who are not. Virtue, to him, wasn't a strength. It was a liability waiting to be exploited, a door left open for anyone ruthless enough to walk through it. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth for 19 years, using exactly the kind of virtue Machiavelli warned against. No purges, no paranoid executions of rivals, no calculated cruelty used as a message to keep the empire in line. By Machiavelli's own logic, that reign should not have survived a single decade. One of these men was wrong about how power actually works. This isn't a video about who was the better leader. That question is shallow. The answer depends entirely on who you already agree with before you press play. This is about something more specific. Whether goodness is actually a weakness in the hands of someone with real power, the way Machiavelli claimed, or whether he simply never encountered someone capable of holding power and restraint in the same hand without one collapsing into the other. Marcus Aurelius is the closest thing history has to a rebuttal, not a theoretical one. A 19-year, empire-spanning, plague-surviving, war-tested rebuttal. To understand why this comparison actually matters, you have to understand what Machiavelli was responding to. He wasn't writing in a vacuum. He was writing while watching Italian city-states, Florence, Milan, Venice, the Papal States, tear each other apart through betrayal, assassination, and shifting alliances that lasted only as long as they were convenient. Machiavelli watched good men lose everything because they trusted the wrong ally, or hesitated at the moment cruelty was required, or clung to a principle a smarter operator would have abandoned. His conclusion in The Prince was practical, almost clinical, stripped of sentiment. A ruler who wants to survive cannot afford consistent virtue. Mercy invites rebellion, because subjects read kindness as weakness and weakness as opportunity. Trust invites betrayal, because the moment your rivals know you won't strike first, they will. The rulers who endure, Machiavelli argued, are the ones willing to act badly when the moment demands it, and more importantly, willing to look virtuous while doing it. Perception, not character, was the actual currency of power. By that framework, Marcus Aurelius should have failed. He had exactly the kind of unrestrained power Machiavelli assumed would eventually corrupt or destroy anyone who held it. There was no meaningful Senate check on his authority. There was no rival strong enough to seriously threaten his throne for most of his reign. Nothing, not law, not custom, not fear of consequence, stood between Marcus and doing whatever he wanted, to whoever he wanted, for as long as he wanted. He ruled the opposite way. For 19 straight years, through plague, through war on multiple fronts simultaneously, through the kind of sustained pressure that breaks most people within months, let alone decades. Picture Machiavelli, centuries after both men are dead, reading Marcus's private journal, the pages we now call Meditations. He'd recognize almost everything Marcus describes. Bad actors operating in bad faith, constant low-grade betrayal, the daily temptation to simply take what you want because nothing is stopping you. Machiavelli would nod along at the diagnosis. He'd have written the same list of threats. Then he'd read the prescription and frown. Marcus doesn't respond to bad people by outmaneuvering them, isolating them, or removing them before they can act. He writes, essentially, that they don't know any better, that cruelty and stupidity in other people are simply part of the natural order, the same way thorns are part of a rose bush, and that the correct response is patience, not retaliation. Machiavelli would call this naive at best, suicidal at worst. Mercy used as a calculated strategy, sure, that has utility. It can be spent like currency, deployed at the right moment for the right audience. But mercy is an actual personality. Mercy with no strategic withholding is how you get replaced by someone hungrier. And yet Marcus wasn't replaced. He wasn't betrayed by his own court in any way that ended him. He wasn't assassinated by a rival who correctly identified his restraint as an exploitable weakness. He held one of the largest empires in human history together through the Antonine Plague, which may have killed millions of his own subjects, through prolonged conflict on the Germanic frontier that dragged on for years, through the kind of grinding, compounding crisis that would give any modern leader multiple reasons to abandon principle for expedience. He used the exact posture Machiavelli insisted could not survive contact with real power, and it survived for 19 years, ending only with his death, not his downfall. So there are only two possibilities here. Either Marcus Aurelius got extraordinarily lucky for nearly 2 uninterrupted decades in an era when luck ran out for almost everyone eventually, or Machiavelli's model, as accurate as it was for the world he was actually describing, has a hole in it that Marcus fell straight through without falling apart. Here's the distinction that resolves the contradiction, and it's easy to miss if you only compare the two men on the surface. Machiavelli was writing a manual for acquiring and keeping power inside an unstable adversarial system where everyone around you is playing the same zero-sum game. His entire framework assumes scarcity, threat, and constant competition for a throne that could be taken from you at any moment by someone more ruthless. Marcus wasn't trying to keep power in that sense. He already had it, absolutely for life, inherited through a stable succession rather than seized through conquest or conspiracy. His actual problem was never, how do I prevent someone from taking this from me? His problem was stranger and in some ways far more difficult. Now that nothing external can stop me from doing anything I want, what stops me from becoming the worst possible version of a man with no limits? That is not the problem Machiavelli solved. Machiavelli built a manual for surviving other people. Marcus built one for surviving himself, which is arguably the harder assignment, because there's no opponent to outmaneuver, no rival court to read, no external pressure forcing the discipline, just a private journal and whatever standard you choose to hold yourself to when literally no one is checking. Think about what that actually requires. Anyone can perform virtue when they're being watched. When there's a rival to outposition, a reputation to protect, an audience whose approval keeps you in power. That's basically what Machiavelli assumed virtue always was. A costume worn for other people's benefit, dropped the moment it stopped being useful. Marcus's version of virtue had none of that external pressure holding it in place. No one was going to catch him slipping. No historian was watching. No senator was going to report back on whether the emperor kept his composure in private. He built the discipline anyway, daily, in writing he never intended for anyone else to read, because the only person he was actually answering to, in the end, was himself. That's the part Machiavelli's framework can't quite account for. He assumed virtue was fundamentally a performance calibrated to an audience. Marcus proved, not in theory, but across 19 years of lived, tested, unwitnessed practice, that it could also be a private discipline maintained with no audience at all. Machiavelli wasn't wrong about most people. He built an entire influential, still relevant philosophy, correctly identifying the gap between the virtue people publicly claim and the ambition they privately act on. Read the history of almost any court in that era, and his framework holds up disturbingly well. He just never accounted for the one ruler who closed that gap completely, who behaved the same way in his private journal as he did on the throne, with no gap left for Machiavelli's model to exploit. That man had the entire world within reach, and chose every single day for 19 years not to be ruled by it.